There are two funerals that changed my life. The first was my father's. The second was the funeral of the man I thought he was. If someone had told me that the greatest lie my father ever told me wasn't spoken with words, but with silence, I would have laughed. Because to me, my father wasn't just a good man. He was my definition of what a good man should be. He was my hero. He was the man I called whenever life became too difficult to carry alone. He taught me how to be a husband, how to be a father, and how to stand back up when life knocks you down. So when he died peacefully at 78 years old, I thought my grief would come from losing him. I never imagined it would come from discovering that I never truly knew him at all. 3 days after his funeral, while sitting alone in his study, I found an envelope hidden inside one of his favorite books. There was nothing unusual about the envelope itself. No dramatic warning. No indication that my life was about to change forever. Just my name written carefully across the front in my father's handwriting. Inside were 7 words that I will never forget for as long as I live. There's something I never told you. Those 7 words destroyed 47 years of certainty in less than 5 seconds. Attached to the note was an old brass key. No explanation. No apology. Nothing else. At that moment, I realized my father had planned this. He knew I would find it only after he was gone. Whatever secret he had carried all his life was something he couldn't bring himself to say while looking me in the eyes. And suddenly, I began questioning everything. What secret was important enough to be hidden for decades? Why had he waited until after his death to reveal it? Was he protecting his family? Or was he protecting himself from the consequences of the truth? What I was about to uncover would force me to ask a question I never thought I would ask about my own father. Who was the man that existed before he became my father? My father, whom I'll call Robert Harrison in this story, was the kind of man everyone respected. He volunteered at church every Sunday for over 20 years. He was married to my mother for 44 years. He coached my baseball team, attended every graduation ceremony, and never forgot to call me on my birthday. The entire town knew him as a man of integrity. At his funeral, people described him as generous, wise, and honorable. Some even called him the finest man they had ever known. But looking back now, I realized there were moments throughout my childhood that should have made me ask more questions. He never spoke about his 20s. He hated having his photograph taken whenever conversations turned to his younger years. He kept one locked drawer in his office that nobody, not even my mother, was ever allowed to open. Every Christmas Eve, without fail, he disappeared for several hours before returning home emotionally exhausted. When I was 12 years old, I asked him where he went every year. He smiled and replied, "Some promises last longer than a lifetime." At the time, I thought he was simply being poetic. I had no idea he was quietly confessing a truth he had been carrying for decades. The brass key eventually led me to a safety deposit box located nearly 2 hours away from our hometown. The bank manager informed me that my father had been renting the box for 42 years. 42 years. That means he had been keeping this secret since before I was born. I remember sitting in that small private room wondering if I truly wanted to know what was inside. Sometimes ignorance feels safer than truth, but curiosity always demands payment. When I finally opened the box, I immediately knew this wasn't about money or inheritance. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, photographs, legal documents, newspaper clippings, and a small tape recorder. Then I found something that made my heart stop. A birth certificate. My father's name was listed as the biological father. The child's name wasn't mine. For several moments, I simply stared at the document, unable to process what I was reading. My father had another child. Suddenly, every possibility began running through my mind. Had he lived a double life? Did he have another family? Did my mother know? Was our entire family built on a lie? But what I discovered next made the story even more heartbreaking. Before we go deeper into this unbelievable story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The letters revealed that decades before meeting my mother, my father had fallen deeply in love with a young woman named Emily Carter. They met during their final year of college and planned to spend the rest of their lives together. They were young, deeply in love, and making plans for their future together. Then tragedy struck. My father was drafted into military service overseas just weeks before they planned to announce their engagement. Communication during that time was limited. Months passed without reliable contact. Letters went missing. Phone calls became impossible. While my father was serving overseas, Emily discovered she was pregnant. Then, tragedy struck her family as well. Her father passed away unexpectedly, forcing her mother to relocate across the country. By the time my father returned home, nearly 2 years later, she was gone. He spent years searching for her. Years. Imagine loving someone enough to spend years wondering whether they were alive, married, or raising your child somewhere you couldn't find. Eventually, he found her, and what he learned changed the course of his entire life. Emily had spent years believing he abandoned her. By the time they reunited, both of their lives had changed forever. She had built a life for herself and their son. My father had moved forward emotionally, but never completely. They realized that although they would never become husband and wife, they would always share something far greater. A child. What happened next is what broke my heart. My father made a promise. He promised he would financially support his son for the rest of his life, while respecting the life Emily had built for him. Years later, my father met my mother and began the family I grew up knowing. But there was one thing he could never bring himself to do. Tell the truth. He loved my mother deeply. He loved me deeply. And he loved his firstborn son deeply. His greatest mistake wasn't having a son before meeting my mother. His greatest mistake was allowing fear to decide how long the truth remained hidden. For over 40 years, he quietly paid for college tuition, medical bills, and countless birthday gifts sent anonymously. He attended his son's high school graduation from the back row without introducing himself. He watched his grandchildren play from a distance during community events whenever circumstances allowed. He spent decades loving his son silently because he believed revealing the truth would destroy two families. Then I found another letter hidden beneath the others. It was addressed directly to me. If you are reading this, then I have already taken my final breath. Please don't hate me. I have spent my entire life trying to be a good father to everyone I loved. My greatest regret isn't that I had another son. My greatest regret is that I didn't have the courage to introduce my sons while I was alive. By this point, I was crying uncontrollably. But there was still one final surprise waiting for me. The tape recorder. I hesitated before pressing play because I wasn't sure I could handle hearing his voice again. Then he spoke. My son, if I could ask God for one more day on earth, I would use it to sit beside you and tell you everything myself. Fear is a terrible advisor. It convinced me that silence was kindness. I was wrong. There was a long pause before he continued. Your brother has known about me his entire life. What he doesn't know is how often I spoke about him. He doesn't know that I kept every photograph he ever sent me. He doesn't know that every Christmas Eve for 40 years, I spent the evening with him before returning home to celebrate with you. That revelation brought me to my knees. Every Christmas Eve, the family tradition I grew up wondering about wasn't a business meeting or a private hobby. It was my father spending time with the son he couldn't publicly call his own. Suddenly, 40 years of unanswered questions finally made sense. The mysterious tears in his eyes, the annual disappearances, the locked drawer, the missing photographs, everything connected. After several weeks of emotional turmoil, I finally contacted my brother. I expected resentment. I expected anger. Instead, the very first thing he said to me was, I've been praying my entire life that this day would finally come. Neither of us could stop crying during our first conversation. When we finally met in person, it felt strangely familiar. He laughed exactly like our father. He loved old Western movies. He folded his hands while thinking, just like Dad. He wasn't a stranger. He was family. Today, our families spend holidays together. Our children call one another cousins. We share stories about the same man from two different perspectives. Ironically, my father's greatest secret became his greatest gift. He spent 40 years fearing that the truth would destroy his family. Instead, it completed it. Sometimes, the people we admire most carry invisible scars and impossible decisions. Sometimes, the people we call heroes are simply human beings doing the best they can while carrying burdens nobody else sees. My father wasn't perfect. He was flawed. He was afraid. He made mistakes. But he loved us all until his very last breath. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson his secret taught me. Love isn't always simple. Families aren't always traditional. Life doesn't always unfold according to our plans. If you discovered a life-changing secret about someone you loved after they passed away, would you forgive them? Please share your answer in the comments below because I genuinely love to hear your thoughts. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. You never know which story might change the way you see the people you love most. Because sometimes, the greatest mysteries in life aren't hidden in treasure chests or history books. Sometimes, they're hidden inside the hearts of the people sitting across the dinner table from us every single day.